And we have takes. Welcome to Football Takes.
Football! Yeah! Football!
All right, gentlemen, we got Thor Nystrom in the house, our lead NFL draft analyst, our chief executive draft officer, if you will. That's Score North on Football Takes.
No changes here. No shake up here.
You mean our front office?
Our front
shakeup?
office, no shake up.
Well, we added Thor. We did.
Well, we did.
We fired the old guy, which was there's nobody basically, and now Thor is.
I'm confident this will work. I'm confident there will not be changes.
So one suggestion that people in the comments had for a viewing experience, if you're consuming on YouTube, is to pull up, like Judd was doing on like a second screen, YouTube video highlights of the players that Thor breaks down.
That's great.
Because we can't do that technically on our own YouTube channel because we'd get like a ding on our channel. But Thor, you're going to lead us through the top 10 edge rushers in the 2026 class. Is this a deep edge pool relative to previous years in your opinion, or not?
I think it's a decent edge group. I think the depth will probably start to fall off some point in round 4, and then later on in the draft, maybe not quite as you're going to have a longer road there to finding productivity on the field. But early on, I like the day 2 as well with this edge group, and I think early on in day 3, there's still going to be some interesting edge rushers out there.
Well, let's start with number 10 on your rankings.
Yeah, number 10, edge 10 in this class for me, Dani Dennis-Sutton from Penn State, 6'6", 261 pounds, and boy did he test well during the pre-draft process, which was more or less a staple of James Franklin's Penn State teams. We'll have to see if Matt Campbell and crew, who have now taken over there, if they can keep having guys that test like this during the pre-draft process. But Dani-Sutton actually came out with a perfect 10 RAS score. He did opt out of the short shuttle, but he did all the other tests. This guy has size, he has length, and then of course athleticism. That was the 9th best RAS score. You go back to 1987 of everyone who has entered the NFL. I also like the two-way game of Dani Dennis-Sutton against the run. He sets the edge. He stacks blockers. He's a disciplined player. Last season, 77.7 PFF run defense grade, 78.82 pass rush grade. But you see this over his career. He provides you value in both phases. It's not a guy, though, who has a crazy high ceiling as a pass rusher, and I think that's why he gets overlooked. He's not as good side to side on the field as the one test that he did with the agility, the 3-cone, as that indicated, at least to my eye. But I really like him north-south. He has length, like I said. There's some speed to power. There's stuff. The comp for me here is a guy that actually we know pretty well. We have a lot of exposure to him in Zadarius Smith. More that sort of north-south power thing, but you have a little bit of stiffness. Again, the one test that Dani Dennis-Sutton did that surprised me was a really, really good 3-cone score. But I love him north-south, and I love both the pass rush and the run defense with him.
That comp is pretty good, though. I mean, if your 10th guy on this list is comparable or has a career that is like Zadarius Smith's was, I think you're going to be pretty happy, right?
Yeah, again, there is, I think, legitimate depth with this edge class to a certain point in the draft. Now, this is still, we're still with the good edges, and I honestly, I like the edges out like edge 15, 16, and there's one, I like a sleeper who's my edge 18, and Mason Rieger, who I've talked about in some past shows. But, once you start to get past that, that's where it falls off really quickly. But up here in the top 10, I like these guys' games, yes.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's keep moving along here into number 9.
Number 9, speaking of guys that I've talked about on the shows here the last couple months, is the first of 2 Michigan edge rushers that I'll talk about. But edge 9 for me is Jaishawn Barham from Michigan, who I comp to Jalen Walker from the last draft, and has some similarities there, and some similarities to some other hybrid players, even though Barham doesn't typically get talked about like some of those other guys did coming in. So I think it's sort of a sneaky sleeper here. But Jaishawn Barham, 6'3.5", 251 pounds. He weighed in during the pre-draft process, 8.8 RAS on him. Barham was a consensus 4-star recruit coming out, initially signed with Maryland. He started there immediately. He was an all Big Ten player as a freshman, eventually got to Michigan Michigan, and that's where Martindale used him as this hybrid player where they would use him as an edge rusher on passing downs. They would move him back to off ball, doing the sideline to sideline thing against the run. You can do different stuff like that with Jaishawn Barham. You can also drop him back into coverage. We love him coming forward as an edge rusher, so you have to sort of decide on passing downs. He has two utilities there. How do you want to use him? Creative defensive coordinators, I think, are going to like this guy. Someone you can use as a quarterback spy as well. He's been lauded with the football IQ, 4.64 speed with him. But he gets there pretty quickly, reads plays pretty quick. He's a really good run defender, very physical for his size. It's a very, very physical player. People bring up his game against USC in 2024, where he blew up 4 consecutive plays by taking on blockers, and it was like this 4-play sequence that was like John Wick. Sort of, where Barham just completely took, it was this gravitational force for like these 3 straight plays.
You took my dog, I'm going to take your life now. That's what's going to happen.
That's exactly right. So, and then as the edge rusher, you get a speed to power thing with him. Very quick off the line, springy athlete. So there's different things you can do with a guy like this. He is one of those sort of new age hybrid type edge rushers, dash off ball linebackers. Again, just doesn't get talked about quite as much with that. But I really like Jaishawn Barham as a sleeper in this class.
Would he be in that type of profile more exclusive to a 3-4 scheme, or could I guess in a 4-3 you're saying he'd just be more off ball, or is he more of a 3-4 guy in your opinion?
I think this is more of a 3-4 kind of hybrid system type player, and that's what Michigan ran. And you could do different stuff with him, like dropping him back to that second level, and then you inoculate him from having to do stuff that that he can't do. Right? There's so many things he can do, but like for instance, one of the things he can't, he's not going to hold the edge for you and play team run defense on running downs as an edge defender, right? Like he's not going to stonewall an offensive tackle and stop the leg drive, right, to funnel everything inside. It's not that kind of, that's why you have him back there at off ball doing a sideline to sideline thing, or some of the quarterback spy stuff, or if you want to drop him back into coverage, like I said, there is a hybrid skill set here in a smart player who has an NFL frame, who has NFL caliber athleticism. Another, topical local thing, Andrew Van Ginkel, very, very, an edge rusher who, I was going to say unorthodox. That's not the right way to say it. The multifaceted skill set of a guy like that, where it's an edge rusher who has elements of an off-ball linebacker, a good coverage player as well within his skill set. Barham has some of that stuff there, where you have the instincts and you have the ability to play multiple different roles and do multiple different things. So a smart defensive coordinator, I think, is going to be banging the table for Jaishawn Barham here in a couple weeks, the end of April.
I love smart players. I absolutely love smart players.
Yeah.
Hard to find.
On that note, just total side question. We kind of ditched the Wonderlic a while back. Is there any publicly available football IQ or mental capacity testing, or is that just like in the backdrop at this point in the lead up process?
No, I mean, like they and especially stopped releasing the Wonderlic stuff publicly. But then, I don't think they really care about that anymore. There's some of the teams do. There's a reaction thing that what was it called? K2 or K something that was out a couple of years ago. But yeah, that's I think that's just individual teams.
I think you find out about that though by talking to people that are affiliated with the team that the kid is coming from. Yeah. I really do, because it's so hard. I mean, I have seen athletes who have so much athletic sense on the field and probably scored about a 10 on the actual Wonderlic test, because it's not the same thing. Like it's not this. It's how fast do you think? But there's so much of a difference between the classroom. Like some of the dumbest people I've known are brilliant athletes.
Yeah, and maybe vice versa. Some of the smartest people, couldn't lift a kettlebell.
It's sort of street smarts too, right? Yeah. Like there's a big difference between book smart and street smart. So, but I like a guy that knows how to get after a quarterback, but also can drop back into coverage, because that's a hard skill set.
Yeah, unique player and prospect for sure.
Yep, no question.
Number 8, Thorsky,
is a guy that I rank lower than most, so I'm going to spend most of my time talking about him, explaining why. But I like him enough to put edge 8, so that's how I'm going to set this up. But Akheem Mesidor from Miami, 6'3", 260 pounds. very, very technically polished is Akheem Mesidor, and he's coming off a huge season. First team All-ACC, second team All-American in 2025, a season where he had 71 pressures, and the pass rush win rate of 21.3% was number 3. That and the total amount of pressures, both number 3 in this class behind his teammate, Rueben Bain Jr., who we'll be talking about here in a bit. And then Texas Tech's David Bailey. Speaking to the technical polish and the deep bag of pass rushing moves that Mesidor has, you see all kinds of stuff. He does speed to power stuff. He does bull rushing stuff. He'll set you up for that, and then he'll start doing his hand fighting stuff. He does hand swipes. He has got a push-pull technique. He does really good counters across the face, the dip and rips, the chops, the clubs, on and on and on. And that stuff's all great, but for the weaknesses, this guy just turned 25. He was a late career breakout guy. You know, he eventually gets to Miami. He was at West Virginia earlier in his career, and as the 6-year senior, breaks out across from Rueben Bain Jr., who is one of the most dominant collegiate edge rushers that you'll ever see. And again, we're going to be talking about him when we get to the final stop on our edge rusher top 10 journey here on this episode. But you have the thing with Mesidor, the late breakout again, and he just turned 25 earlier this month in April. So it's an older player who has a foot injury history, lingering foot injuries. He missed a lot of the 2023 season with that. He has torn ligaments in each of his 2 different feet. He also has a shoulder surgery in his past. So there's a lot of different stuff like that with the profile that elevates the risk in a way where I feel like a lot of times when people are talking about Mesidor, it's more from the other angle of he's pro ready and look at how productive he was last year, et cetera. And I acknowledge all of that, but the data we have on guys that get drafted, at this age when they don't break out until this age, the hit rate in the NFL and the ceilings has typically been a little bit lower. So that's what makes me a little bit trepidatious on this profile. Why I rank him a little bit lower. I couldn't go lower than this though, because you also have the data going back 25 years when you look at the win rate in the pass rush, the pressure rate, different stuff like that. So I sort of split the baby here. I have a second round projection on Akheem Mesidor.
Okay. Yeah, the age 25 thing it's tough from a couple angles. One, okay, you're dominating younger dudes on the football field and guys who are mentally and physically aren't where you are. So you have to take that into account with the productivity. But then as you project forward, it's like, all right, okay, if it takes him 2 years to click on a football field, now, I mean, you're not even like, you're probably not doing a second contract with him if you really project out that far too. So the 25 age thing does throw a wrench into the process for Mesidor.
And for me, the way that I see this, I actually a little bit different with the age thing. I actually don't think too much about players as second contracts. Like that doesn't really go into my thinking with the drafting of any player, because the value that I feel that you get from drafted players, it is the excess difference in value between what that player's actually worth for those years under that rookie contract, against what you have to pay him. So like the thing of starting like I acknowledge that with people of like, okay, Mesidor, he is quote unquote pro ready. The thing is though, when you have the guys that don't break out until they're 24 or 23 and a half, 24 heading into their age 25 season, you wonder why that didn't happen when they were 20 or 21 or 22, right? And that's typically the thing when you get to the next level, and all of a sudden the thing of being more polished than kids that were at high school prom last May or 2 years ago, that's who Mesidor was consistently beating, right? It's a guy who's like, he, because of his circumstances, has gotten his 10,000 hours in the cockpit, whereas some of these collegiate tackles in the ACC he was going up against, they had never seen some of the tricks he was doing, like his ghost moves and different stuff like this. They're like, what? It's like almost like they had seen a ghost. But when Mesidor goes to the next level, they will have seen these offensive tackles in the NFL will have forgotten more than Mesidor has developed to this point. So at that point, when craftiness doesn't get you there and headiness, where that is sort of negligible because everyone has that at the next level, then how does he win? I think that's the sort of interesting thought experiment with Mesidor.
Did you say foot problems?
Yeah,
the red dots.
Is it
Move
coming
on.
out, Judd?
Move on. Let's go to 7. Don't want to talk about this kid. No interest.
Sounds like a red dot.
Oh, yeah.
All right, number 7.
Number 7 is Derrick Moore, the aforementioned other edge rusher from the University of Michigan. Although with Derrick Moore, it's more of your prototypical type edge rusher. 6'4", 257 pounds. I think Derrick Moore is also very underrated for different reasons than his teammate Barham. But in the case of Moore, he's one of the better pass rushers in this class, certainly with the edge rushing position, but he's not generally talked about like that. He was also a team captain at Michigan. He was their team MVP last season with 10 sacks, Derrick Moore. And the thing I have in my note about him, couple notes, furious speed to power bull rusher with smoke coming out of his nose. Oh. He improved the hand usage and added more counter moves in 2025. So basically it was a guy that already had a world-class fastball that has gone to the effort here the last couple of years to add off-speed pitches and breaking pitches to it. So it makes him sort of a puzzle for offensive tackles now because you kind of got to be sitting back on your heels waiting for the heat, and now he can do different stuff off of that. So he just consistently wins, and then a relentless sort of pursuit style to him too. He's just sort of always like plugged into the socket. A former coach of his told me earlier in this pre-draft process that both Moore is better than people think, that he should be talked about in a different echelon, and also told me bet on that kid. And that was like the one guy of all the other people that this coach had coached before where he was like that one. Because I was like, give me one. He's like, Derrick Moore. Wow. That's the kid who is going to succeed. I would bet anything. Weaknesses for this guy. Now, these are mine, not that coach's, but weaknesses on him for a, sort of this power-based pass rusher with the edge who's so good at that and so good playing off of that. He might be the worst run defender on my top 10 list. If not, he would certainly be bottom 2. Mm-hmm. And he would get breathers. When he would get his breathers at Michigan, it was on the running downs, not on the passing downs. Now, he did improve his run defense grade this past season from 64.3 to 76.3, but it was partial run snaps. And this is something that, you would have to get to the bottom of each team, talking with Derrick Moore, is that your gas, he has that relentless style, right? But is it like, does the gas tank go a little bit lower? So then you need the breather on the run stuff. Is it that the team didn't trust you as much with that, right? Where it wasn't as much, you'd have to get to the bottom of that. It's a decent per snap run defender, at least was last season, as developed into that. But like I said, Michigan would take him off the field certain times with that.
So is this a potential, at least in the National Football League, situational rusher as opposed to a 3-down guy?
Yeah, that's why I think the floor is higher than he's given credit for, because I think he's going to be a really, really good, DPR, if nothing else. And he's different than a lot of those guys where a lot of them, they know it's the speed thing. Yeah. A lot of the DPR guys coming in off the bench. With Moore, he gives you a different sort of look, right? And so you have to be ready for him when he comes out on the field. If nothing else, he is going to be that a valued sort of third rusher that comes in, whatever. Obviously, I think the ceiling is higher than that, but that's what embeds the floor.
All right, love it. Number 6 here, Thor.
Number 6, we go to Zion Young, University of Missouri, 6'5" and 3/4, 267 pounds. He's a big edge rusher, a big power edge rusher. 7.7 RAS on him. He reminded me a bit of Keon White as a power defensive end that plays the run. But long and well built, Zion Young, he's a power end, like I said, bruising, assignment-minded run defender. His run win rate last year of 9.3%, best among this edge class of the prospects in it. Zion Young has shown improvements as a pass rusher, but he does not project as well in that phase as he does with run defense, where he is elite. I have seen some of the improvements with the edge rushing. Like I said, the thing that his edge rushing is based off is he has like the solid off the snap. He has a good first step, and then he has power as well. But that's where you see sort of the lack of athleticism from there, and then also the lack of bend. There's some stiffness there as well with him. So it's not one of those like easy sort of bend the edge type guys. But he brings the power. He's going to get on top of you real quick. He has the acceleration off the line. Then he has the long levers and he's stronger than most offensive tackles. So that's sort of what the game is predicated off of. You have the elite run defense with that. That's the thing that sets his floor at a fairly high level. What can you improve as a pass rusher with a guy who's not an elite athlete? That's going to inform how high his ceiling ultimately is. But I think this guy, nothing else, starts in the league as a reliable defensive starter for a long time.
Okay. And then into the top 5 here. And by the way, I just want to remind the Twin Cities portion of the audience here that is consuming these position rankings episodes of Football Takes. We have our 5th annual Purple Daily Draft Party presented by Standard Heating and Air Conditioning on Thursday night. So as we record this will probably drop a day later, but we're 2 weeks away, baby, from the NFL draft. And Thor's going to be front and center, whether you're in Minnesota or whether you're somewhere else around the country. The Purple Daily YouTube channel, it can be your only screen for the night. So hit that subscribe button on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. And right here, if you're consuming this on the Football Takes YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and we will continue to give you football takes into the top 5 of Thor's edge rusher rankings.
5th edge rusher for me is TJ Parker from Clemson, 6'3" and 5/8", 265 pounds, 9.4 RAS on him during the pre-draft process. Has some length as well. 31 and 1/8 arms is at least over the threshold for edge rushers. But this is a curious case of a guy where it was like sort of, two different sort of tales told by his on-field play during his career. First 2 years that TJ Parker goes to Clemson, high-end recruit. In 2023 as a true freshman, then 2024 as the true sophomore, 32 combined tackles for loss over those 2 seasons and 16.5 sacks. He also forced 6 fumbles in 2024, which was a school record. Then, in so doing, he gets freshman All-American honors in 2023. 2024 was second team All-Conference. Last year, the counting stats, they dipped down for TJ Parker as they did basically for all of his teammates. I've talked about this with Peter Woods. Yeah. Even Avion Terrell would have an argument for this, but more the biggest ones that have it are the guys in the Clemson front 7, and multiple of them have talked about it of they move into a defensive scheme Clemson did under Tom Allen where it was less about allowing the players to shed and pursue, and it was more about keeping gap integrity, and that it manifested in TJ Parker's numbers, like I said, at the end of the season. But Parker, it's another power end. He effectively converts speed to power off the snap. Very violent shedder. He's got really, really strong hands, and he'll steer you around and then throw you. He does have an angular playing style, so it's one of those guys who pops up a bit on the snap. Parker does have some hip stiffness, and he's a little bit slower off the snap than a couple of these guys that we have talked about. And then of course he, like I said, he plays high, so the leverage game isn't something that he's going to win all the time. I want to see him continue to improve and diversify his pass rushing attack. It's a lot of the speed to power stuff, and then sort of the pursuit and the relentlessness of that. But if he had more moves where he could set it, like taking a page out of Mesidor's book, although to be fair, Mesidor is 3 years older than most of these guys, but like that kind of evolution with the pass rushing moves, if Parker got more of that, he could mitigate some of this not being the elite athlete and then having a little bit of hip stiffness. But that power element of his game, it also plays against the run. This is a really good team run defender who also sets the edge for you. So TJ Parker, a solid edge 5 in this class.
One quick question before we keep it rolling here. You talked about like Clemson's defensive scheme and how that goes into some of the outputs. And then as we talked about on the defensive tackle or interior defensive lineman episode, Peter Woods is a force who takes up space and opens up lanes for his teammates to maybe pick up statistics, right? How do you parse all that? Like how much do you look at that with TJ Parker and say, nice to be playing next to a Peter Woods, for example? Let's factor that into where you should rank and what your NFL productivity might look like.
Well, I mean, circumstance, it matters for all of them, right? Like, and if you had a one size, it's like baseball. If you have one size fits all metrics, it's a lot easier to sort of stack people, up and down. But like when you're talking about football, the reason that like evaluation and like the projection of it's way more art than science is it's impossible to unspool one player from the 10 that are surrounding him on any given play, the 11 that are across from him, the assignments that each of them have been given in that particular play that has been called, the scheme that they're in, and then the players around them, right? And the way that affects the way that the offense, it's sort of impossible to spool it out every single time. You just have to, you get the ocean of data over it, and then you get your eyes on them, and then you try to do your best with projecting it. But I mean, to the question, prior to this past season, TJ Parker playing next to Peter Woods, and then you got, Capehart as well. They both did it, and Clemson's had good edge rushers on the other side as well that teams have had to pay attention to. That helped a lot, right? I mean, like in the havoc numbers that both Woods and Parker put up, indicative of that the previous 2 years. But then this year, you change the defensive scheme, and then you see the way that when circumstances go against you, how that ends up manifesting in the counting stats. So you can sort of speak to it both ways, but with the Clemson guys this year, I have to bring that up for them, because this was a thing that multiple people, and players have sort of hinted at here after the season coming out of that new defensive scheme.
Yeah. Okay. Number 4.
Number 4 edge rusher is Keldrick Faulk from Auburn. This is another power guy, and this is one of the better ones in this class that we have, edge rusher position. 6'6", 276 pounds, and this kid could easily get up towards 290. He could even start pushing 300 if you really wanted him to. A big strapping frame on this guy, really long arms. 9'1" Raz he put up. You love the combination of Keldrick Faulk, the combo you get of size, length, athleticism, and in particular power out of this guy. But speaking to the reach, 34 3/4 arms, that is obviously about the highest on the spectrum there. 82 1/4 inch wingspan, so he's got sort of the reach of an offensive tackle. The vertical jump that he did pre-draft process, 96th percentile. The broad jump was 97th. I'm getting a call there. Only 20 years old, Keldrick Faulk. So he's not going to turn 21 until later on there. And I like the sort of grinder mentality that Keldrick Faulk plays with as well. He is a truly elite run stuffing defensive end edge rusher. 99th percentile run defender the last 2 years. You look at PFF grading, and the eye test is very clear on this. It's also a team run defender. Like, he's going to turn the offensive tackle back in and force concepts that are seeking to get outside of him. He's going to funnel them back inside, just scuttle plays, even ones that he doesn't get stats on in the run game. So elite in that phase. The question with Keldrick Faulk is, what is the ceiling as a pass rusher? How much more is there left to untap there? You see it sometimes with him. You see it sometimes. We've just never seen it consistently. Like this past season, against Baylor and Oklahoma, a little stretch there. He had 8 hurries, 2 sacks. In other games, as a pass rusher, he just totally disappeared, where he's not creating any impact. Now, he is against the run, play in and play out, but the pass rush thing is something that comes and goes. Where can we figure it out for him to be a difference maker there? Auburn would sometimes kick him inside on passing downs, which sounds great, but then you didn't see it as much there. Where can we deploy him best there to try to get more outside of him? I think that would help his NFL team to try to figure that out. The worst part of his on-field game, it's the slow get off the line, and his 10-yard split of 1.68, which was 23rd percentile, sort of indicative of that. But once he gets going, that's where, and then starts converting the speed to power there as well. That's where you see sort of that north-south game with him. You want to see more nuance to his pass rushing, and then more adding more to his repertoire there. But he is versatile. He's projectable, and again, he's very young.
I was going to say, I love the age here. Like, I feel like if you can get coaching with no college, I mean, I'm talking your profession is now football, which it sort of is in college. I love that age.
He studied too much, actually,
because it feels like there might be rawness here.
Yeah, the other thing, I love the age as well. I was going to comment. I'm glad Judd brought that up. The other thing, you mentioned the arm length and the wingspan, and I believe both measure as, like, if not the top of the draft class, near the top. There's so many things to scout when it comes to these edge rushers and any defensive player, but one of the main things, when it boils down to it, when it comes to who wins a pass rush rep, is who gets their hands on the other player first. If an offensive tackle allows Danielle Hunter with go-go gadget arms or whoever it may be to get hands on them first, they get to dictate where the rep goes oftentimes. And when you have the longest arms and or wingspan of anyone in your draft class, you have a chance either in pass rushing or in, as Thor mentioned, controlling what happens on a run play. So that's going to be something that definitely catches teams' eyes when you look at the metrics.
Yeah, and Keldrick Faulk, he gets nitpicked a lot because you go back a year to the 2 early mock drafts coming out of the last draft. Like if you go back to May and then you look at those mock drafts from there through at least the early part of the fall, halfway through the season and into the latter part of it, Keldrick Faulk would have been a top 10. Yeah, he was a top 10 pick in all the 2 early mock drafts and into this season as well. Now you see him fall down a little bit in some of these different things, and it's because of disappointment with the pass rushing, where it was like there was this hope of like that would take a jump up, and Auburn was sort of a tire fire last season, and we didn't really see any improvement with that with Keldrick Faulk, and sometimes that gets focused on with his evaluation. But that you try to look at it as like what do you get out of him? The floor for me is really high because of the elite run defense, and then I think too you can't throw the book in on him as a pass rusher yet. If nothing else, you have all the projectability with it. He's a good bull rusher. Can you start to do stuff off of that? We've talked about a couple guys on this list where early on their career, it was the bull rush, and then Derrick Moore is one of them. Mesidor is another guy that didn't have the full repertoire early on. They keep adding to it. Can we do stuff like that with Keldrick Faulk? But I think also the other thing with Keldrick Faulk that doesn't get talked about that I wanted to bring up is he's listed as an edge rusher, right? And I talked about the thing where then they would kick him inside occasionally on the pass rushing downs. There's another sort of element to the versatility between the different kind of defensive schemes that could be interested in Keldrick Faulk that, like I said, I don't think gets talked about enough, where I think Keldrick Faulk could become a 3-4 defensive end, which is actually an interior defensive lineman, but he's, of course, listed with the edge rushers. Faulk, he could either be, it's a defensive end in either or, right? So if it's a 4-3, he's going to be your hand in the dirt sort of power edge on the one side, but in a 3-4, that's the thing where, I said that I think he could easily add more weight. He's going to continue to. It's a young kid. You could easily get him up, this guy up to 285, 290, right? And like the Vikings just drafted a guy like this last year. I mean, later on, and not same kind of player, but this almost identical frame, and from the SEC and Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. Well, that was for the 3-4 front to be a defensive end there. So anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up with Keldrick Faulk.
Yeah, I'm actually glad I try to check myself to not make every single player about the Vikings, but like I immediately thought of Tyrion Ingram Dawkins when you started explaining with the wingspan and everything too. So that's and we'll see how his career develops. He flashed quite a bit in training camp and got some run in the regular season too. But we're into the top 3 here, boys. Thor, number 3 on your edge rusher list
is David Bailey, who's just coming off that amazing season at Texas Tech, 6 foot 3 and 5/8, 254 pounds, and tested as a 9.7 RAS athlete during the pre-draft process. But David Bailey, he came over from Stanford. He started his career at Stanford. He went to high school, one of those powerhouse schools in California, and sort of stayed home at Stanford. But then he went and sort of took the NIL bag with some of these other guys that signed with Texas Tech last off season. And Bailey just had this amazing season. He led the FBS with 14.5 sacks, also had 81 pressures last season. He's a destructive pass rusher. I mean, that's the thing with him. Explodes out of his stance. He has no wasted movement. It's also an efficient guy. So you have like athletic sort of propulsion forward with no wasted movement. And then he keeps his speed when he's going around the arc of the offensive lineman. Like it's a guy where, even as he's angling, the offensive lineman gets hands on him, he's going to continue, moving at the same momentum. And then when he gets off of him, gets to the top of that arc, he can shed and get down the line real quick, bend and get flat. He projects best as a 3-4 outside linebacker pass rusher. He did make strides in run defense in 2025. That's the area of his game that gets most nitpicked. But he's more of like the generate TFL flash kind of run defender of getting in there quick and making some flash plays than he is a consistent team run defender, because you'll see it go the other way where now he explodes upfield and now it's really easy to just push him more upfield, and then there's a big crease for the running back to come in there. So that's something to watch out for. It's more of a finesse kind of a guy. lacks play strength as far as being the sort of edge guy, setting the edge against the run. He doesn't have an anchor for that. And then you're starting to hear a little bit more about this. This wasn't talked as much about earlier in the pre-draft process, but he's been getting asked questions about two things as well during the pre-draft process. There was in this past regular season when Texas Tech, they had their one loss of the regular season was to Arizona State, and Bailey was clearly annoyed after the game, and there was a little bit of a altercation with a credentialed photographer on the field as they were walking off, and they got into it and had to be sort of pulled apart, staff members to go in there, so that wasn't the best. And then there was another incident where the camera caught him. He stepped on a player's face mask, getting up off of a pile. So those are two things that David Bailey is going to be asked about. But just as far as the one seed, the pass rushing here, and it's back multiple years, but he's a really, really skilled pass rusher.
As long as he doesn't have a foot injury, Judd's not going to red dot for the behavioral stuff. Yeah,
he sounds a little bit like he's got the Ndamukong Suh problem.
A little bit.
He just like spazzes out and
where he just gets really pissed off at and steps on opponents, which believe me, I don't like, but I much prefer that to a foot problem.
Yeah. Me too. By the way, I'm old enough to remember when for about 10 years nobody would go near a Texas Tech defensive player in the NFL draft. So it's nice to see in recent years Texas Tech putting some pretty high-end defensive players in the NFL draft.
That's what you call oil money, Phil. We've entered the NIL era.
David Bailey might have to take a pay cut too, just to be clear.
Yeah,
dude,
he actually might.
We should add a new category of like what their NIL salary is versus their slot value in the NFL draft.
Can I go back to college for another year?
Who's taking the biggest haircut here?
100%.
All right, number two.
Number two is the hybrid dude that we all do talk about in Arvell Reese from this class. Edge 2 for me from Ohio State. There's a whole bunch of guys that you can evoke here from recent years. Jalen Walker being one of them, talked, with regards to Barham, but Giad Campbell as well, who I ended up comping him to, Abdul Carter, Micah Parsons, right? Like we've seen more and more of this. But as for Arvell Reese, 6'4", 246 pounds, 32.5-inch arm length. So he has the length there as well, almost an 80-inch wingspan, 4.46 40-yard dash on Arvell Reese, tested as a freak in the couple tests that he did. He didn't do all of them, but we didn't need to see it because of the athleticism that we had seen on the field from Arvell Reese. This guy, he's a former defensive end who has this built in a lab frame, along with that length. Very fluid and instinctual in space as well. And the tape to watch for that one, because you can see the pass rushing with him. Now that's more consistent across. Then you can see some of the stuff he does with the sideline to sideline stuff as the off-ball linebacker. But the thing with the fluid and instinctual in space, the one that I go back to is against Washington in the fall. Washington has this undersized kind of dual threat quarterback, Damon Williams, who he created a stir after the season for one night on Twitter because he announced that he was going to Damon Williams, I'm talking about, announced that he was going to transfer from Washington the same day that Lane Kiffin had Sam Leavitt to LSU for a visit. And so then there was all this drama of, because they thought that Lane Kiffin was going to go after him, Damon Williams, like he had coming out of high school. But anyway, Damon Williams, a small little scrambler who's dynamic with his legs, and it's really difficult to get him on the ground in college and then defend, the dual threat thing. And keep in mind, Washington, they had Jonah Coleman, they had Denzel Boston, they had all these different weapons that you had to be concerned about. But what Matt Patricia and the Ohio State defense, what they wanted to do was make sure, first and foremost, that Damon Williams could not hurt them with his legs. So they basically made a deal of we are going to lock you in a prison of the pocket behind the line of scrimmage. You're not going to be able to do the extend thing. We're not going to let you steal first downs from us. And how we're going to guarantee that's all Arvell is doing this afternoon, is spying you. And Damon Williams could not have been more frustrated as that game went on. There was nothing he could do in none of his movements. Every time it was like a shadow across the field, only it was a shadow that was like washing over him because Arvell Reese is significantly bigger than Damon Williams is. Damon Williams had one of his worst games of the season in that game. But, Arvell Reese, again, the off-ball linebacker, sideline to sideline against the run as the edge rusher, he gets there really quick. You have an enormous utility with that. So it's a guy where defensive coordinators, the chess piece type guy, where you just move him around for different tasks. He can handle almost all of them. You can line him up anywhere, and we now know that within an NFL sort of scheme and with usage, that works with Arvell Reese. Because last year with Matt Patricia, that's exactly how he was using Arvell Reese, was as this sort of new age kind of guy in a pro style type defense.
Yeah, I mean, we know if Aaron Glenn is getting any semblance of say, this is the number 2 overall pick, right?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, they're going to have to decide, do you want sort of the diverse skill set of the guy that can play the multiple different things like Arvell Reese, or do you want the single best skill, on-field skill in a David Bailey, or do you want the most well-rounded, guy as the traditional defensive end in a Rueben Bain, who we're going to talk about in a second with the power element of his game. But that's an interesting decision there for the Jets, assuming, of course, that they go edge rusher with that pick.
Yeah. And that brings us to the number 1 edge rusher on Thor's 2026 rankings.
Yeah, the guy that, if falling down here, at the end of the process, whatever, I don't care. Rueben Bain, for me, bell to bell, edge one, and is one of the top players to me in this class of the non-quarterbacks, and you can make a very strong argument that he is the best non-quarterback in this class, in terms of value. But edge one for me, out of the University of Miami here, I comp him to Dwight Freeney. There's just so few guys that you can go to where it's the built low to the ground, the sawed-off edge rusher, where you have both the explosion, you have agility, and then you have the power. And with Freeney, it was a bit more agility, and Bain's got the more power. But there again, you're going from a short list of who you can sort of comp Rueben Bain to, but all-time power with Rueben Bain. And there's and you hear him nitpick for the lack of arm length, because that's also fairly historic. His sub 31-inch arm length is in the bottom first percentile for edge rushers. You go back in the combine data that we have the last 25 years, and all that's fine. There was a heavyweight fighter that dominated boxing for over a decade in that division, despite having one of the shortest reaches in the division, which wasn't commonly thought of before as something that you could succeed fighting that way. His name was Mike Tyson. You find that thunderous power tends to beat reach disadvantages because that's the one thing that nullifies it. Right? You want to cross that moat, you do it with force, and that's what Rueben Bain does. It just sort of crashes the gate on that. He's going to get into your chest. You're not going to lock that guy out. It's just he's too powerful. The speed to power, it's too much, and just too much power from there. And then it's the thing where you sit back on that. He also has the agility that he can bring in there. There is a little bit of stiffness. He's not as as pure bending as some of these guys around the edge, but that dichotomy of power and the agility, and you see it. I mean, whenever this guy's been healthy, he has been dominant. Last season, he had 90 pressures. He had 12 sacks. 2024, he was dinged up with injury. So, if anyone, you watch his tape, you look at his stat line 2024, just keep in mind that he was dinged up that season. But this year he comes back, he's fully healthy. And even when you try to double team him, this guy's going to beat it. He's really good against the run as well. And it's someone that, with 4-3 teams, you could think about on pass rushing downs, kicking him inside. That's something that Miami did, and then send him as a 3 technique there. Or if you in a 3-4 defense, when you go to even man front there, going into nickel, you could also kick him inside there. Like I said, he has experience there, but for me, the best edge in this class.
Yeah. What's your best guess about how his lack of arm length will be accounted for in this draft by teams? Where are we now with that? Because at times it's been a big deal. At times guys have certainly been taken with that issue. So what's your thought about where this is going to factor into where he ultimately gets drafted?
It opens the door for a potential mini fall for sure. There's been, ideas of could he fall to the back end of the top 10, like teams like, I was on Kansas City radio a couple nights ago, and they asked me about that possibility, right? The folks in Dallas, that's their biggest dream is that Rueben Bain falls out of the top 10. The Dallas fans, but the lack of reach. And then, when you're looking for comps, a lot of these prospects, it makes you feel better if you can look at, that's why I love comps, but if you can put them right next to someone from the past where it's the same physical dimensions, it's the same athletic testing, it's a similar sort of progression through college and statistical profile, then you can be like, oh yeah, he's like him. And we've seen this work already with guys that are crazy outliers like this. Again, there's just not as many guys that you can point to. And that's the thing where the risk threshold for some people, where you can start to lose tiebreakers in a top 10, where evaluators, decision makers, they can't whiff on that decision and keep their job. But for me, I think Rueben Bain is the guy that is going to overcome that, again, because he's got a couple superpowers, but in particular, the thermonuclear power that he brings onto a football field.
Oh, football. Thermonuclear power, baby. Yeah, I love that you did this. I love that you put him number one and stood by a conviction there, that some teams might, like some teams, they tend to not want to be criticized. And well, if Arvell Reese is going to result in less criticism, the Jets tend to be susceptible to that. I'm looking at, there's a million different mocks, but I'm looking at one that has Rueben Bain falling to 8 to the Saints, for example. So the fact that there might be some teams back end of the top 10 that could get the best edge rusher because some teams get weird about a measurable versus just watching the tape is one of the most fascinating phenomenons of the NFL draft. So
yeah, and the other thing I'll say, because he gets nitpicked a lot, and the conversation just sort of, it's like a broken record, and it just sort of goes around on the lack of arm length, whatever. But this guy's an elite run defender too, and that doesn't get talked as much about with the edge rushers anymore. It's like, whatever you do with the pass, that's all that matters, and we don't talk as much about that. There's a huge value to run defense now, and the way that, because the NFL is going back more to that, especially they can thin out your box, and then they try to run like that. A guy like Rueben Bain, where it's the 2-8 game, and you can also trust him to set that edge for you. It's very valuable to not be getting gashed on that side of the field. In addition to having the elite pass rusher coming from there, the whole question comes down to: is it a thing or is it not a thing? Is his power, is it a Mike Tyson thing because overcoming that arm length, or is his game there going to be something lost in translation on the other side? You guys obviously know what my opinion is on that. For me, this is a top 5 pick in a draft class that has very few blue chippers. Rueben Bain's name is absolutely one of those blue chippers.
Yeah,
Keldrick Faulk, boys.
I like Keldrick too. Is that your guy, pick. Judd?
That's your. Are you?
There's
sticking?
enough, and I actually looked it up as you were talking. There are comps out there to Daniil Hunter.
Yeah, dude, the long arms.
You're not quite sure what to make of him. I mean, Daniil fell to 3rd round. So the fact you're not quite sure what to make of him, but yet he has all this potential, and he's a kid. I mean, he's very young. Of all 10 of your guys, that's the one that really intrigues me.
Both coming out of the SEC, young projectable edge rushers. Yeah. And it turns out Daniil Hunter, some of the ancillary things that they were more indicative of what the truth was than just the rote sack number. And
Correct.
With Keldrick Faulk, you can focus on the rote sack number. You can focus on all the other stuff.
Yeah.
It's all about the clay, boys. It's all about the clay.
That's it.
Can I mold you?
Football. Or can I red dot you?
I've red dotted a couple guys on this list.
All right, Thor Nystrom. Those are his top 10 2026 NFL Draft edge prospects here. Again, hit that subscribe button, the like button on Football Takes. For the Sports Dad, I'm Phil. We'll see you guys next time.